In this video, we're going to create this 3D couch using Maya 2022. I'll begin by holding down the space bar, going to Create, and choosing Free Image Plane. In the attributes on the right, I'll go to Image Name and I'll import the images I need for my reference. I'll duplicate the image plane, selecting one or the other. I'll go back out and I'll get my other reference image. Shift selecting both, I'll go to the channel box and I'll assign them to a layer, naming it template, and I'll move them back a bit and then I'll lock them down. I'm going to use my CV curve tool to revolve a basic shape and edit it from there. In my front view, I'll hold down the space bar, I'll go to Create, CV curve tool, and I've set it for 2. I'll go in and make a half revolved shape of what I might want to start with. Holding down D on the keyboard, I'll move the pivot to the point I'd like to revolve. And it's going to be on the x-axis. Holding down the space bar, I'll go to Surfaces, Revolve, Attributes. I'm setting it for control points and X. I'll hit Apply. Now I want to flatten out the bottom, but before I do, I'm going to merge the vertices at the back end and the front end. I'll go to my perspective view to do this. Hitting 4 on the keyboard, I'll right click and choose Vertex, and I'll grab the vertices at the very tip, and I'll go to Edit Mesh and I'll choose Merge to Center. I'm going to do the same at the back. I'm going to return to my orthographic front view again, and I'm going to start to flatten out the base of this. I'll hit 5 on the keyboard so I can see the geometry for the moment, and I'll hit W and I'll double click on the Move tool to get the attributes. I'll open up Soft Selection, turn it on, setting it for 1, I'll right click and choose Vertex, and I'm going to begin to move these sets of vertices up and flatten them out so that it looks like the base of that couch to some degree. And I might play around with the number over here if necessary. It's very subjective at this point. I fine-tuned the front snout a bit by moving the polygon faces down, and now I'm starting to do a little bit more editing, and I'd like to do it symmetrically, so I've got my Move tool selected, and when I double click I get the attributes. And under Symmetrical, I'll leave the window up so that I can start to edit some of the points, maybe where the cheeks would be, which might be started with this vertex over here. So if I've got the symmetry chosen for axis Z, I can now edit both of them by selecting just one side. Now this will be a little handy when we make the ears as well. I'll return to my object mode, and I'm going to hold down the space bar, and I'm going to go to Mesh, and I'm going to go to Smooth. I'll go to the attributes, and I'll make sure that it is reset to the original settings. You'll see the division of levels will be 1, and I'll click on Apply and I'll close that out. Now this is going to give us the opportunity to go in and to extrude the ears on top. And if we use the symmetrical setting, we can also do it on the other side. Go to Face, and I'll just identify some faces on one side that I think would be the best place to put the ear in. And again, we don't really have much of a reference to work with. We would really prefer orthographic 3 views at the very least of this. With my symmetrical setting now, I'll choose the polygon faces with which I'd like to extrude ears, so I'll select them holding the Shift key, and I'll just bring up my attributes for the Move tool. And I'll begin by clicking on my Extrude tool. Now I can go to Edit Mesh and click on Extrude to access it there if I wanted to. And I'll drag up to get the ear shape. I'll hit R for scale and I'll taper the top. With my ears extruded now, I'm going to work on the cheeks. Now we're going to use a couple of different tools to get that effect. Holding down the Command and Shift, I've gone to Mesh Tools and I went to Sculpt Tools, and I've chosen the first one, which is Sculpt Tool, the second, which is Smooth. And because I've got my Z-axis move tool selected for symmetry, I can now use the Sculpt tool. And when I click on it, I can see that I get my attribute toolbar on the right, and I get a brush. And the brush icon can be changed both for size and weight by adjusting the tool settings. So the brush is set for about 0.5, and I've got the strength at like 0.6-ish, and I'm going to go in, and you'll see that you can now adjust this, and you'll be able to edit both sides at once. So I'll start to pull out where the cheeks are a bit. And if I was to preview by hitting 3 on the keyboard, you'll see it shows me what our results will be if we use the smooth proxy or we increase the poly count once we've edited the shape the way we want. Now with that set, I'm going to put the indentation for the couch seating area is. To create that seating area, I'm going to select my geometry. I'll right click and I'll choose edge, and I'll select the edges in which I would like to kind of pull it back and pull it down to get that 90-degree kind of an angle we're seeing there. I'll hit W on the keyboard and I'll hit B to get my soft select. And in there I'll play with my soft select. I've got it set for 0.5. I'll leave it like that, and I'll start to manipulate this edge to get what I want. And I'm going to reduce the soft select to about 0.2, and then I'll get the edge down here, and I'll start to edit that as well. So I'm just going to fine-tune this, and then when we come back we'll talk about the feet and the tail. Now that I've got the cheeks the way I want them, I'm going to go in and edit the seating area. I'll take the symmetry off of the move tool, and I'll start to select the edges that I might want to edit this from to get that kind of 90-degree angle we need. Now that I have the body kind of the way I want, I'll put the reference to the front paws and then the back tail. And I'll use a polygon sphere for that. I'll go to my side view where I'm looking straight on the snout of the cat, and I'll go to Create Polygon Primitives, and I'll choose Sphere, and I'll drag a sphere in my viewport. And then in the inputs for polysphere, I'll reduce that to 6. And this will allow me to model this and flatten it out on the bottom and leave it rounder on the top. So I'll start by selecting some of these vertices. And I still have my symmetrical selection on, so if I select these vertices on one side, it'll affect the other. If I hit 3 on the keyboard, I'm getting something I could use. I'll go to the object mode, and I'll start to move it into position and scale it accordingly. Now with the tail, I'll do the same sort of a thing. Once again, I'll go to the front view of the object, going to Create Polygon Primitives and Sphere. Return to my perspective view. I'll drop the poly count down to 6 again. And we should have something like this. Once we introduce our textures, we'll have what we want. Now I did one variation on this. In the one I created, I replaced the tail with an actual kind of a cat-shaped tail using the Extrude Poly tool with a path and a NURB circle. Once the modeling is done, the next step would be to do the texture mapping.